Welcome to the 11th episode in the Swag's computer series. My name is Nathan, but you can call me Swag. Today's episode, I would like to cover operating systems. What is an operating system? What are the major types of operating systems out there? What is the history of each one? These are the types of questions I will be looking at and more in this episode, so stick around. And if you aren't already subscribed to my channel, consider doing so. It'll be greatly appreciated, and it'll help me out. What is an operating system? Let's start with the dictionary definition. According to Oxford Languages, an operating system is defined as the following: the software that supports a computer's basic functions, such as scheduling tasks, executing applications, and controlling peripherals. And if you don't know what a peripheral is, please consider watching my whole series. There should be a link down in the thing. There should be. Consider watching more of Swag's Swag's computers if you haven't seen the previous episodes. Major operating systems: Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Everyone knows about the first operating system I'll be talking about, as a huge percentage of computers today have it: Microsoft Windows. To be precise, 76% of desktops run this OS, short for operating system. As of August 2022, Mac OS, Apple's competitor to Windows, has about 16%, and Linux-based OSs have around 5% of the share. These three major OSs I'll be talking about during this episode, with Windows going first. Windows. A brief history of Windows. The very first version of Windows was released back in 1985 and was designed to run on top of MS-DOS and was innovative back then for allowing you to point and click on icons to get things to run or change. It took 2 years for it to ship after the initial announcement. It took until Windows 95 in 1995 to be able to ditch using MS-DOS for some things, and yet even today, some things still use a command prompt in Windows, but it doesn't run MS-DOS by terminal. XP was the next major OS and still popular even today, even after Windows 7 and 10 have been released. Minimal requirements to run. According to the Microsoft Windows website, to run Windows 10, the minimal requirements are a processor of at least 1 GHz or faster, 1 to 2 GB of RAM, depending on whether you want to run 32-bit or 64-bit OS. At least 32 GB free on your hard drive. Graphics card should be compatible with DirectX 9 or later, and Windows DDM 1.0. A display with resolution of at least 800 by 600 pixels, and internet connectivity. I'd recommend a wired connection myself, personally. Honestly, these are the minimal requirements. And for the best performance, you need to greatly exceed them. Building or buying, look for a large hard drive, powerful CPU and graphics cards, and lots of RAM for the best performance. And now, Mac OS. A brief history. What we know today as Mac OS is completely different from the original classic Macintosh operating system. The classic OS for Apple's computers was first released in 1984, over a year before Windows 1.0, and was released for the Motorola 68K series of processors, but later switched to PowerPCs. Unlike Windows, which you could buy separately from the hardware, Mac OS has always been bundled with the hardware, never standalone for purchase, except if you're an Apple-approved developer. The Mac OS of today replaced the classic OS with the release of Mac OS X, which is a Unix-based OS, current version is numbered 13 and is named Ventura and was released on August 24th, 2022, 4 months after it was announced at Apple's developer conference in June. Differences to Windows. macOS's main differences to Windows, with the key being support for a single button mouse. The fact that few games offer support for the OS is also a big difference, though it is said that graphic artists and other digital creators prefer using it for their work over Windows. Linux. A brief history. Linux was first created in 1991 by programmer Linus Torvalds while studying computer science, originally as a project that became the kernel, or core, of the Linux operating system. The next year, it was relicensed under the GNU GPL, and that's where the kernel is still today, but has grown to over 22,000 lines of code. However, because it is open source, anyone can use it in their project, which leads me to the next point about Linux. Flavors of Linux. Distros. A distro is a version of the Linux kernel turned into an operating system via a software collection and most often a package management system and a desktop environment, including a Windows system. A package in this case is a software or software library written for a specific brand of Linux. You might have heard of distros like Debian or Red Hat or Ubuntu. There are also versions like Mint, Fedora, and Gentoo. The kernel itself is also used in non-GNU operating systems developed by Google, most notably Android and Chrome OS, but these are not considered to be distros by everyone. Mostly because some common GNU software that can run on other Linux distros can't be run on Android and Chrome OS. Where is Linux used today? Linux is used today in all sorts of devices like routers and home theater PCs, though about 80% of the world's servers run a Linux distro as their OS of choice. Specific hardware like the Raspberry Pi have Linux distros designed for them exclusively. Gamers can rejoice because SteamOS uses the Linux kernel. And conclusion. In finishing up today's episode, I would like to say that I've learned quite a bit about the various operating systems I've covered. Everyone has their favorite of the three that I've covered, so I won't recommend an operating system en masse, as each use case and budget is different and may require a different operating system for the hardware. You should know what an operating system is, and a bit about the history behind Windows, macOS, and Linux. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and if so, please consider clicking the like button, and if you're new, subscribe to the channel. Also, please recommend the video to others who might find it useful, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll try and respond as quickly as I can. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon.